Ready. Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever our friends are. I'm Jenna Turner. Thrilled to be here on the land of and, friend and longtime collaborator of Jenna Arnold's. And I'm here with Dax. We were just talking. We have so many things to talk about. I'm here with Dax, who I met through my very good friend, also and collaborator, Jonathan Jacobs. And it's been such a beautiful web to weave on this show here, where we talk about all things men and money and the money stories, the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that the world tells us about money, all of us, and specifically men and what that means for power and legacy and the world. And here we are at the land of and for that reason, because everything is both and instead of either or. Jenna always wears her and necklace. I have my nuance necklace here. So let's get it going, Dax. Hi.
Good morning. I feel a little left out. I didn't wear a necklace today. I probably should have. I feel like I should have prepped for that.
We'll need to get gold plated HI dollar sign MONEY
Perfect.
signs. So yeah.
Perfect. That'd be
Uh,
awesome.
yeah.
That'd be perfect. But yeah, good
Well,
morning.
I'm
How
glad
are
to
you?
hear you. I'm really good. I'm really excited I love way. It's really lovely since we started having these conversations.
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn more. I think you are probably the most seasoned streamer that we have had on our. Actually, no, that's not the case. I mean, anyway, I you've been on this for a while, and I'm curious to hear about. Like, I want to kick it off with like, how do you
Mhm.
make money, right?
Yeah. Hi everybody. My name is Dakota. I'm better known as Dak. We actually are having this conversation in the green room here of like how you know me and like where you met me in life is how like you know me as. Like I've had different nicknames throughout my life. So like if you know me from like childhood, you know me as Coda. And, like all my childhood friends call me Coda. My dad calls me Code Man. It's those kind of fun
Mhm.
nicknames. And then like in high school, it was just Dakota. And then, like in college, it became Dak. And then, if you know me from the internet, you might know me as Dax or Dax Ahoy from the broader internet because I've been creating content for as long as I can try to remember. I'm a content creator. I'm a professional marketing professional. I said professional twice. I'm always searching to do something new, something creative, and try to find some way to have a positive impact on the world. And right now, the ways I make money, I am a live broadcasting producer for a financial publishing company. And then I do freelance semi professional motorsport photography. I do some random consulting work every once in a while. I stream, I make content, so I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything. I'm always chasing some new creative endeavor, something new to keep myself busy, and Lord knows I do enough of that to keep myself busy.
Um, so much to work with here. Okay, let's start with the first thing that you said,
Yeah.
right? So, producer, let's double click on that one first.
Yeah. So I've my marketing career has kind of gone a lot of different ways. So when I was in college, I went to school in Oregon. I went to Oregon State University. I majored in speech communication with a focus on international bargaining negotiation and interpersonal communication, and a minor in creative writing. Uh,
Hold on, wait, say those 3 things again. You majored in what?
Speech communication with a focus in international bargaining negotiation and interpersonal communication. For a long time, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I even took practice LSATs and was like going down that route. And one of my professors is a UN certified negotiator, and he works always with like the Paris Climate Accords and stuff. He's a certified UN negotiator for those types of like UN endeavors. And I was like, man, that seems super interesting. I feel like I'd want to go down that route. Um,
Right.
found
Jenna
myself,
is up right now. She's like, "I
yeah,
gotta know."
found my way into creating content at a young age. I always knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to share stories, and that started with I was able to kind of combine that with my passion for motorsport and the automotive world into a motorsports photojournalism blog when I was in college because I wanted to get
Mhm.
into photography and I was self teaching myself how to do photography back then. And so I kind of combined those things. That became a project I called Time Attack Hack, for a long time, which I can get into the nuance of that later. But that was a fun project for several years that I worked on. And then while I was at Oregon State, I realized I'm like, hey, we need a better market to serve the needs of our students, and there's a lot we can do to benefit our students and to help them find more support through what they're doing at Oregon State, find better access to their resources, resume help, grad student success center, stuff like that. And so I did a lot to try to help benefit the all the stuff that I as a student had wanted. I worked to build a department that would help provide entertainment, education, and support and resources to students at Oregon State. Tried my darndest to turn that into like a full time position after I graduated, but unfortunately that wasn't in the budget, and so it was going to be a student position as long as it existed there.
Right.
And then from there, my roommate I was living at the time sold cars, and I was like, "Well, I need a job out of college." So I went and I sold cars for 3 months. Did not enjoy selling cars, but it was very instructive. I learned a lot about sales processes and stuff, and that's kind of when I was like, "Hey, I really like this whole marketing side of things. I love social media. I love creating content. I love telling stories, and I feel like I could do that well on the marketing side of these things." And so I dove headlong into that, and I ended up being the director of marketing for an automotive dealership group on the West Coast for 5 years. And then I had a bunch of random things going on at the same time. So while I was doing that, like professional, more, normal track, I was also really getting into photography. And I just started going to more events, taking more photos, and sharing them online. And eventually it caught the attention of a woman named Kathy, who is the head of a budget endurance series called Lucky Dog. And she kind of gave me my first big break when it came to motorsport photography world. I went to a
Mm.
race in Portland, took photos, posted them on Facebook just for fun, just hanging out with my buddies. And she loved them, messaged me and said, "Hey, we are launching a huge new collaboration with Hankook in Monterey at Laguna Seca in 2 months. What would it take to get you there to cover it?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, what? Like, you want to fly me to California to take photos at a historic racetrack? Uh,
Right.
how do I say anything but hell yes to this? Like, I don't know what to say." And that was
Wow.
to kind of like bring it back to our topic of money. That was my first like experience of like, I don't know how to value my own work here. I don't know what the value of what I'm bringing to the table is. And trying to figure out like how do I analyze what it is I'm doing and the value that I'm bringing, because like I feel very much like an amateur with this photography thing. How do I say that this is worth XYZ? Like I don't know what value to place on that. Um, and so that was kind of an interesting conversation for me at the time. It was like there's value in just the opportunity for me. So I, like,
Right.
cover my expenses and maybe pay me a little bit on top so I make a little bit of money on this adventure. And she's like, absolutely. And that kicked off. I've been their staff photographer the last like 6 years now. And that eventually parlayed me into working with IndyCar and the Grand Prix of Portland. So I've covered IndyCar. Um, got connected with just through networking, showing up to events and talking to people. I've always been an extrovert. That's why I've been streaming for 2 years. I just can't stop yapping. That's just the one skill I have in life, is not knowing how to shut up. And
Love
i
it.
uh I parlayed it into magazine features, magazine covers. Some work I'm doing is getting published in um another motorsport magazine that's coming out right now. um Working with private
You
drivers who rent tracks, like all kinds of stuff.
So let's talk about the actual like economics of this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this knowing your worth is something we talk about on this show all the time, and it's
Mhm.
really challenging. And even it also comes down to like, well, what is someone willing to pay, right? And
Exactly.
this goes back actually to this place where you were so in your purpose and in your passion and using your superpowers when you were at OSU and you put together that program, right?
Mhm.
And of course, you were like, this should be my job and you should clearly
Right?
pay me. And they were like, "Oh, we don't have the money." And I think
Mhm.
that those are the kinds of messages that are often sent in ways that we don't fully appreciate their positive, negative, or sometimes innocuous impact on how
Yeah.
we see all the value of what we have brought to the world. And it goes back to like an artist deciding the price of their
Mhm.
art. And um, so let's talk though about that. Speaking of an artist knowing that, like, what was the first time that you were paid to take photos? Was it that trip, or would you think about it more so in terms of these publishing opportunities? And if you don't mind talking about the dollars, we try to be
Yeah,
as,
no,
like,
not at all.
here
I
as we
think the
can.
first time that I was paid to take photos, so, friend of mine in college, his wife was part of a biotech startup at Oregon State, and this is when I had a $400 camera that my parents got me for Christmas one year, I think, is when I was took these photos. But it was also the first time I was published, funnily enough. But I was paid, I think it was $300 to take some staff photos and, like, some laboratory setup photos, and those ended up getting published in Forbes, um, on, like, their online journal, and I'm like, this is the most random experience ever. I really feel completely out of my depth. But sure, I have a byline in Forbes now. Great. Like that was the first time I was ever paid to take photos was doing that. And the rest had just been pure passion. I just love taking photos. It was like totally unrelated to motorsport, which is like motorsport action sports has really been like my bread and butter when it comes to photography. This is nowhere even close to that remotely. So it was wildly different, but that kind of like set for me a baseline of like, okay, well, this is $300. Little did I know at the time I was massively undervaluing myself. But I also felt like I was just getting started. There's no way I can justify a higher price when I'm just starting out here. Um,
Right. We all feel
and
that. Give an emoji
right,
in the chat if you feel that, right? It's
and
like, "Oh,
it's
well, I'm here to learn. I'm here to," people
yeah.
always feel like amateurs, and I work with powerful, influential people. I will tell you, everyone feels like an amateur in something.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things where it's like, especially in art, I feel like there can be very much clicks and closed off audiences and a lot of gatekeeping, because obviously it's a competitive field as well when it comes to professional ranks of photography. And so while there is like a bit of an artistic camaraderie there, there is a competitive nature to it as well. So when I was, fast forward 3 years and I'm, covering IndyCar and I'm working with the American Rally Association, getting to meet people who know action sports, the likes of Travis Pastrana, Ken Block, these very famous names within that field. I'm like, okay, what value do I place on this work now? Like, I know the work's good. People tell me it's really good. How do I value this now? How do I find a competitive price point? And that took a lot of like, I had to really, for lack of a better word, start kind of like stalking some of my favorite photographers to try to understand what they're charging. And I kind of came to a realization of like, all right, cool. If I go for like a full weekend taking photos, that's anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 that I'm looking for in total compensation from that because I understand the value that it can be used further onwards. And that's where kind of like having the marketing background and understanding like how things get used from a marketing standpoint, how they get used from an advertising standpoint, understand the nuances of licensing, usage, rights, all that stuff became very important because then I could actually take that and be like, I know that this is how this is going to be used for XYZ. For like example, I have a photo that I worked with Hankook Motorsport on. I think it's been published like 20 different times in different magazines as like an ad set for them. That was about $1,500 to give them usage rights for that one image. And so it kind of feels weird to be like, it's one image. How is that worth $1,500? But it's the knock on effect. It's the full reach of where that image is going to go and the life it's going to have outside
Sounds
of
like
what
it's
I do.
probably worth more than $1,500 now.
Potentially could be. That was a very early on move for me in my photography journey of like trying to establish value for these types of things. And I still probably undervalue some of the work that I do, but it's
We
so
all
tough to nail
do.
that down.
We all do it, and that's part of what we're trying to talk about here, um, especially because we think in certain circles that I roll in, we know that, like, women and other sort of marginalized
Hmm.
people undervalue our work because we are undervalued by the
Absolutely.
world.
Absolutely.
At the same time, what we're doing here is saying, "And men too," right?
Hmm.
That this is a
Yeah.
human condition of not being sure how much your work matters, how much your gifts matter.
Yeah.
And so as an entrepreneur and someone who does, similar type of work that you do, I, can affirm for you that you're not alone in this perspective.
Yeah. And it's been a lifelong struggle, and I feel like the average person feels that when it comes to trying to understand of like, how much money to ask in a job interview. It's the same way of like, I don't know how to value this, and like, you can go on the internet and you can research and be like, okay, well, the internet tells me I'm worth XYZ, but I've never made that much money. How do I step into this and like embrace the confidence of like I'm worth this much and not demand it, but hold your own personal line of like, I know my worth, I know my value, and I'm not going to accept less than that. That's such an intimidating and scary thing to try to do. And
Totally.
I feel like we obfuscate so much of that process from like a professional level. It's just so hard to break into that sometimes and really stand in that confidence.
100%. 100%. Let's rewind a little bit. Let's go
Yeah.
to your roots and your origin story. What is your very first memory or cognizance of money?
I was looking over the sheet you sent, and I was trying to think about that one, and I honestly don't even know if I have a great answer for it. Um, my first job was doing like I worked for the school district in my local hometown. I'm from Sweet Home, Oregon, tiny little town in rural Oregon in the foothills of the Cascade Mountain Range. And my parents were both educators. My dad was a biology teacher for 30 years. My mom was a math teacher for like 35. I actually had my dad in high school as a biology teacher. Funny experience. Um, but I was working for the school district, and I was, mowing the soccer fields and the football field, and laying irrigation pipes, just different stuff, just to like make some money so I could put gas into my little pickup truck I had, and go out with my friends or something. And that was kind of my real first experience with like earning my own money, paying my own way with stuff. I My parents were always the type of like, once you start driving, like maybe we'll help you buy a car or whatever, like a used car. I was like, no, no, I want to get the car I want to get. I don't want to get the car you want me to get. And so I saved up money, bought a pickup truck out of a field that was honestly a hunk of junk, but I learned how to fix it up myself. I wanted to pay for it my own way. So that's kind of my real first memory I have of like really doing my stuff myself, and like trying to earn my own money to really try to build what I wanted.
Yeah. I love that. My brother is similar, and is like lifelong tinkerer and now runs his own mechanic shop.
Nice.
What do you remember as like kind of maybe it's pre-money, but like the currency that was traded, let's say in elementary school, right? Whether that was
Oh,
snacks
do
or
you
like,
remember
I guess,
Livestrong bracelets?
oh yeah, totally.
Oh
Lance
man,
Armstrong.
the Livestrong bracelets, those were the currency. Like if you had those, you could trade those for anything. Anybody had like a Go-Gurt you wanted, boom, Livestrong bracelet, it's yours now. Like that was for no reason other than just like social acceptance and like hierarchy in like a middle school or whatever. Like that was the entire
Right.
currency, was just Livestrong bracelets. I don't know why we had such an obsession with those.
Wait, this is fascinating to me for so many reasons. Because one, it also, like, puts us in, like, a cultural time, right?
Yeah.
Um, but also, like, so in some ways, like, if you had a Livestrong bracelet, it's 'cause you donated, right, to the campaign, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's, goodness, but also it's like, they like, was Livestrong doing really good marketing? Like, how did they
Yeah, I'd love to, like, go back and see, like, an assessment of that, of, like, understanding how they reached out to people, because that became such, like, a weird cultural moment, and I wasn't old enough to think about, like, the broader scale of that, but now I'm like, "Okay, I wanna research that now." That's a fun rabbit hole I feel like to go down.
Yeah, totally. Because when we think about power, like, various things are imbued with power based on what
Mhm.
we as society or personally give them. Um, and yeah, these kind of cultural moments. Yeah, I guess the Livestrong bracelet was really the first like rubber bracelet like that that wasn't just like, I don't know. My son comes home now with ones with like poop emojis on them, and it's you know. Uh, interesting. Okay, so let's also talk about you clearly grew up in a house where it was modeled to be of service in your community, right?
Yes,
Teacher,
absolutely.
educator. And I think that's probably something that sets you apart, that has set you apart early on your trajectory and the way that you see the world.
Yeah.
How, in this moment in time, culture, society, in your life, um, how do you kind of see that as part of this matrix of how you're showing up?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents, definitely set a precedent early on of, like, giving back, helping, promoting to build people up and lift people up. My dad was also the head track and cross country coach, so he was, an athletics coach as well as an educator, and just, like, being of service and helping people reach their potential was, really something that was modeled for me pretty consistently when I was young. I'm the youngest of 4, I have 3 older sisters, so I had a lot of, people that were, ahead of me in life who were kind of, like, showcasing that as well. One of my sisters who
That's
I'm
some
immensely proud of.
feminine leadership, sounds like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, me and, like, we were all in, like, leadership in high school and stuff, which honestly, the leadership class in high school was really just messing around more than anything. But like, we were all, it was known in our household of like, you need to get straight A's, you need to show up, you need to like do extracurriculars. Basically, all of us were athletes. I was a three-sport athlete all the way through high school. I was involved in a ton of extracurriculars, and it was
Which
kind of like
sports?
this. I did 4 for the longest time. I did baseball, soccer, basketball, and track, and then when I got to high school, it was a little too hard to do track and baseball, and so I ended up just doing track and field. But I was soccer, basketball, track all 4 years of high school, and I was varsity for 4 years of soccer, 2 years of basketball, 3 years of track, I think, if I remember correctly. But
Right.
yeah, did a lot of sports. I've been a big sports guy my entire life,
Were you
so.
a women's basketball fan at OSU?
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. Sydney Weiss, if you know who Sydney Weiss is, she and I had a lot of same classes together, and so we would always have study groups together. She'd absolutely kick my ass at horse when we got bored. We'd play a game of horse, and she would absolutely destroy me at it. But yeah, loved the women's basketball team there. It was so cool to see the level of success that they had there, and like seeing Sydney. I think she's back now as like a coach there with the team now. Um, so it's been so cool seeing the success of those programs and the athletes that come out of that. Their gymnastics program at OSU has always been insanely good as well. So that's always been super fun to go to the gymnastics meet and see like literally just like the Olympic lineup just is at my university. It's like, okay, cool.
Right.
This is awesome.
Do you agree that there's something about like of athleticism that helps people see people differently?
Oh, absolutely. I think when anytime we see anybody who does something that like to our eye feels like, wow, how can anybody do that? That seems insane. Like it seems otherworldly. It seems superhuman. And I think it goes back to this idea of like the training and effort that goes into making these insane feats of athleticism, overnight successes, whatever it is, you don't always see the 10 years of hard work that's behind that. And so it can
Right.
seem like this otherworldly thing that's unreachable for the average person. But truly, it's like, no, if you show up consistently, you put in the effort, obviously there's luck, genetics, whatever, when it comes to sports. But if you put in the work and you put in like your 10,000 hours, whatever, like it is possible to get to there. It just takes a level of dedication and consistency to really truly get there. Um,
Yeah.
excuse me. But back to your question of, service to community and how I show up for that now. I've always wanted to like help people. Like I don't know what that means for me, and I've always been trying to like find that definition. And I think I even have it like in my Twitter bios. Like all I want to do is just create dope work and do good things for the world. That's always kind of been like what I want to do. And I enjoy creating cool things. It's why I got into photography because like this is really cool. I can create really unique artwork out of this that I find passion from, and then apparently other people really enjoy as well. When I started streaming, it was a thing of like I just want to challenge myself creatively, and little did I know that I would find connection with childhood friends that I haven't talked to in 10 years that I'm getting to reconnect with and become friends with again as adults. Little did I know that I would become a place of entertainment and support for people within my little community that I've started to build. And so I kind of realize now of like the way I can help people is through the skill sets that I have. I can be entertaining. I can provide people a space to where they can feel comfortable to express themselves. I can, show up, and as much as I need an escape from the real world from the day to day, other people do as well. And that's something that I can provide in my own little way. I can provide that experience for people. And so that's something I'm still trying to come to terms with. And it's a very weird thing. It's especially weird to like make money from that, but it is an odd experience. But that's kind of how I feel like I'm able to show up these
Yeah.
days and just use my position of privilege as a straight white man in this society. I can use that privilege to help uplift people who are from underserved communities who do not have that level of privilege, and try my best to advocate for things that benefit people. That's kind of how I try to show up my best these days.
Oh, so beautiful, Dax. So beautiful. Yeah, I think that in my experience, very smart, competent, interesting people end up being like it doesn't feel real that you could make money doing the things that you
No,
love and that you're really good
not at
at. Like you
all.
pinch yourself and be like, that can't be right. And
Yeah.
I've had a few inflection points in my life and career where I was like, wow, like I'm getting paid to be me. This is really powerful. And I have wanted that for everybody else since
Yeah.
experiencing that moment myself. And I guess my question for you is, do you feel that? Do you feel that you're, um, You said something like, "I have," like, you didn't say, "I have everything I need," but I took it that way, right? Like, my
Yeah.
superpowers can, like, pay me back, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the things we talk about on this stream a lot is, this feeling of abundance and sufficiency or enoughness,
Mhm.
right? So do you feel that? Have you felt that? What do those words bring up for you?
I think my raging perfectionism would prevent me from saying yes. um, I'm slowly working through that. My therapist is amazing. She helps me with that a ton. But I would say, like, in some ways, yes. I think financially, and this is kind of like, I feel the entire conversation, and I was talking with some of my coworkers this morning about, like, telling them, hey, I'm going to be, offline for about an hour or so doing this conversation today. And I feel like it goes back to the idea of, like, money doesn't buy happiness, but it does solve your money problems, which can really lead to a lot more happiness. And
Mhm.
that's kind of something that I've experienced a lot of. Like, I have made a lot of money in my life, and I've made very little money in my life. Right now, I'm in a period where I'm making half of what I used to, but I would say overall, I'm happier than what I was when I was making more money. And so it's like, I can kind of see how that comes into play of, like, yeah, if I had more money right now, it would probably reduce my stress levels a little bit. And I'd be able to, like, take myself to go out to, like, a restaurant, a fancy restaurant or something a little bit more often. But do I necessarily need that? And that's kind of the idea of, like, no, I don't necessarily need that. Excuse me. Um, but it's really caused me to focus on what are the core things that make me happy? Where do I derive the most joy out of my life? And for me, it is, supporting people that I care about and love, supporting my friends, lifting them up and building them up, doing fun, creative things, which I'm, of course, able to do just from my home, which is awesome. And just finding ways that I can continue to just build deeper connections with my family, with my friends, with the audience that I have online. Anywhere I can deepen those interpersonal connections, because it's through those interpersonal connections that we truly find a lot of our joy, our fulfillment. And I think that's the part of, like, the idea of, like, money doesn't buy happiness. It doesn't buy those interpersonal connections. And I've always been a person who focuses heavily on interpersonal connections. I love people. I love talking to people. I love engaging with people. And so that's been kind of like my focus, especially in the last couple of years, is how do I showcase a lot more vulnerability in my interpersonal relationships, and how do I try to deepen those to where I'm getting a
Mm,
lot more fulfillment and a lot more day-to-day joy out of all of those relationships than I used to not get. That's
right.
honestly been the most valuable and rewarding thing for me lately.
Um, I have so many things that I wanna talk to you about the communication, interpersonal relationship stuff, and, like, you're clearly like me, you're a convener, you're a community builder, you have
Yeah.
creative ideas, and you're like, "How can I bring this to life?" Where have you had to set boundaries on, like, energy vampires or other people who, did not bring out the best version of you or yourself, or, because that's something that I think as we get older, we have to have some more discernment around, and it can be really challenging.
Mhm. Thankfully, I have a lot of very great people around me these days, to where I don't have too many people around me that I'm like, man, that person is just taking all of my energy. I think for me, the biggest boundary I've had to learn, and I've not been the best at setting boundaries, working on that too. But the biggest thing that I have had to try to learn is, like, recognize when I have the energy to show up and support other people, and then get better at recognizing when I need the support and actually asking for it. And that is
Mm,
such a difficult thing for me to do, because, one, I need to recognize it, and two, I need to actually vocalize it, and that is, both of those are incredibly difficult to do. But I had a moment this last week, the last couple of weeks. I was, working a ton at work. We had a new product launch. We had a ton going on. I was insanely stressed. I was trying to show up for my audience. I hate ever having to cancel once I tell everyone, "Hey, I'm going to be live at this time," and then I realize I don't have the energy. I can't show up and be entertaining today. Like, I need to take time for myself. I don't do that either. But showing up and being able to, like, hey, I need this time for myself, and recognizing where my limits are. And through that same period of time when I was, like, super stressed and didn't have a ton of bandwidth or a lot of energy, I had some close friends who were really going through some really tough times. And I was like, I want to be able to show up for them, but I recognize that I don't necessarily have the same emotional bandwidth as I normally would because of everything else that's going on. So trying to recognize that, and then just also temper how much I'm able to give, because I am very much a person who will pour from an empty cup. And that's not always the healthiest thing to do.
yeah, yeah. I I worked on I've been doing boundaries work probably for about over 10 to 12
It's
years at this
so
point.
hard.
Really hard, and it's hard for anybody, and then you add layers for people who, like, genuinely care about
Mhm.
people who are hurting. Like, it's really hard to not think about someone who's hurting. It's also really hard in this society of like, well, I see myself as someone who does this thing, and here I am not able to do this thing.
Yeah.
And for me and people in my life, personally and professionally, that can be really challenging, especially in the times that we're living in. Like I struggle to
Mhm.
balance with, you know, everything that I'm balancing personally in my life, let alone the state of the world.
Yeah.
So we definitely need to give ourselves grace in all of these places. Yeah, that's something I think we've talked about on His Money before. This idea of giving ourselves grace.
Absolutely. And that's something I've definitely spent a lot of time working on. And like, it's funny, my therapist will always be like, "You give really great advice. You just never follow your own." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really good at not following my own advice that I give to other people." So trying to look myself in the mirror and be like, "All right, what do I need? Okay, tell myself this. Can I actually accept that?" That's the real trick.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's very easy for all of us to give. Whew, yeah, I mean, I think that it's really hard to give ourselves like, with the stories that we tell ourselves about who we
Mhm.
are can get in the way sometimes of how we actually really wanna show up in the world, and I think that's the work of a lifetime.
Absolutely.
Um, but I think, yeah, I feel you on that because same thing, it's like I can just pour and pour and pour, and then I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like, my battery is dead." I literally and sometimes my body tells me, I don't know if you've had that happen to you before too.
Absolutely, I have, and, like, trying to recognize, like, "Hey, can I recognize when I'm at, like, 25% battery versus when I get to 0?" It'd be nice to have some sort of, like, warning of, like, low battery, some sort of warning that I'm getting close to exhausting myself and burning myself out. Because I burned myself out a couple different times in my career where I'm like, I overdo things, and, like, a really great example is at one point, I was this is like 4 years ago now, I think it was. I was, working for the automotive dealership group, and I was running all their marketing, and I was doing that, like, 50 hours a week, and then every single weekend, I was somewhere in the Northwest or California doing some sort of photography trip, and I found
Mm.
myself in Eastern Oregon at a racetrack out there with, like, a local Porsche club, and I'm like, I was hired here, I'm being paid thousands of dollars to be here, I'm getting to take photos, really cool photos of insanely cool cars, and be around really interesting people, and all I wanna do is be at home asleep. And that was kind of my like, "Oh, hey, I might be a little burnt out. I'm not enjoying something that is literally my dream.
What
Why
year
am
was
I not
that?
enjoying this?" This was, I think, 2021. I think it was summer of 2021.
Yeah.
And I was like, "All I
There
wanna
was
do is be
one
at
year
home."
when, like, the word of the year was burnout. Maybe Jay can look that up and put it in the chat for us. Speaking of Jay, right here, the antidote to imposter syndrome is grace. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
that binary, but yes, I agree. I try to give grace to myself and others as much as I can.
same.
Um, uh when you think about how you invest your money, and that's everything from, like, what clothes you decide to
Mhm.
buy to, like, actual, like, financial investments in stocks and bonds
Yeah.
or whatever, or investments in, your own health and well-being, your time and money you invest in therapy. Talk to us and the community here around how you make those decisions.
Yeah. I guess I'll start at the top, like actual investments. I have a little bit of money invested, not a ton. I feel like I'm like 8 years into my professional career, and I feel like I'm still so early into my career in so many ways. And so like I've invested a little bit, like a little bit in retirement funds. Worked with a personal financial consultant, so I have a little bit of money into like different ETFs and stuff. Nothing too crazy. It's funny because now I work in financial publishing. I'm finger on the pulse of like all these different things. So it's kind of been fun to like passively just learn a ton of all these different like all these insane traders, people who've worked on Wall Street and hedge funds and stuff, like passively getting to talk with them, pick their brain. That's been very intriguing. And so I'm like, okay, I might want to talk to my financial consultant and like see if we can do something different here. So that's been kind of like interesting from a side standpoint. When it comes to like investing, my time and into things that I look at, like therapy is very expensive, but it has been one of the best investments I've ever made in my entire life. I think it's around $400 a month for me right now, maybe a little bit less than that. Um, and like my current health insurance doesn't help pay towards that at all. So it's like, okay, I got to cover that entirely out of pocket. And like that's comparative to like a car payment for a lot of people. And so for me, I'm like, it's something that I see it as such a foundational investment. If I'm going to invest in anything, investing in myself and my own personal growth and well being is something that I could probably spend an unlimited amount of money on, and it would be worth it. Um,
Right.
when it comes to investing into how I spend my time, I'm
Hold
not
on,
great.
wait. I need to interrupt you there because I have
No,
a
go for it.
question.
Please jump in.
Who taught you that?
Of like investing in
Where did
myself.
you learn that? Yeah, where did you learn that?
Uh, I don't know if I have a specific place I learned that from. It's more so just been like a realization for me. So the in 2022, I moved across the country from Oregon to Minnesota, and I live in Minneapolis now. And that was a very rough patch of my life for me. I had been with my partner at the time for about a year. We moved together across the country, and I'm no longer with them. And so that was a very foundational life experience for me because I moved to a place that was pretty new to me. Two of my older sisters live here, but they had moved away from home and from Oregon like 10 years ago. So it was like I knew them, but we didn't really know each other as adults. The last time they
Mhm.
really spent a ton of time around me, I was their dumbass 16-year-old brother. In many ways, I'm sure I still am their dumbass 16-year-old brother. But it was, we didn't have the same relationship that we necessarily do now. And so for me, it was a huge transitional period. I had quit my job at the car dealership. I had launched this creative consultant agency with a friend of mine that I was like helping get off the ground. And so it was a very transitional period of my life, and to have something that I thought was going to be like there for a long period of time kind of fall out from underneath me, and then to go on to experience two different layoffs with two different companies right after that, it was a huge period of instability in my life, and a huge time of like personal development and personal growth. I started therapy, I think it was spring or summer of 2022, like right before I moved, and being able to have that as a constant, and learning that the one constant I have and the one person I'm not going to escape is myself. So I better get good at liking myself and understanding how to engage with myself, to because that's the one person I can't escape. And for a long time I didn't like myself, and it took me a long time to get to a point where I'm like, I'm actually happy with who I am, I'm happy with where I'm at, I'm happy with the personal growth that I've found. So I think it's just a lesson I kind of picked up along the way of like, I'm stuck with me. So anybody else can just turn my stream off anytime they want if they're tired of me yapping. I'm stuck with myself, so I have to learn to live with that one. But I think that's kind of where I picked it up at, and kind of like where I just had to find a level of acceptance with that. Through all
Yeah.
the ups and downs of everything, like I was the one constant that I had. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. In my work, I see a lot of things that people ruminate on and
Hmm.
things, stories that we tell ourselves that don't serve us. And actually, it was interesting because when you said $400 a month, it got me thinking of the phrase when people say, like, well, who's living rent free in your brain? Right. And
My own
'cause you're
overthinking and my own thoughts. That's the problem.
right. Like, let's take out that tenant that and then we'll like, that's worth $400 a month. Let's take that tenant out of this
Absolutely.
brain. Yeah, thank you. So many things that you shared are so beautiful. I know we're gonna have some incredible sound bites from this stream. I really appreciate your vulnerability and your
Oh, of
candor,
course.
and the way that you articulate so many of these things so beautifully. And, my reason for interrupting you was because, as it's been said in the chat, right? Like, more people like you, please. Like, yay for men in therapy. Um, and, this idea that to need therapy, like, is somehow paradoxical to being a man is something that we
Absolutely.
all know is ridiculous. And here at the Land of
Absolutely.
we especially know that that's ridiculous. Um, uh, talk to me about we talked about like stocks and investments,
Mhm.
right? And you mentioned kind of being exposed to some of the information, and let's call it
Yeah.
culture of money, that you hadn't necessarily been before. And it's not that it made you feel less than, you were just like, oh, like there's a there for me there. Like,
Yeah.
I'm curious about that, right?
Yeah.
Um and so and then you went into like investing in yourself, and that's when I had to just like,
I take
put a
many
pin.
tangents.
Yeah, I love them. Me too. That's how we're fast friends here. Um, but continue on that trajectory, right? So there's traditional investments in financial
Yeah.
products. There's investing in yourself as your most valuable asset, as we
Mhm.
often say. Um, keep going on that trajectory.
Yeah, I had to try to figure out where my train of thought was going with that. So when it
Well, I
comes
had
to, like,
asked,
an
like, when you go shopping, like, how do you make decisions,
yeah,
right? What brand to buy or, like, whether to cook or eat out or, like, just I
yeah.
love hearing about the decision and calculus that we make.
So in the past, I've made upwards of like 95,000 dollars a year. I think was where I kind of topped out before. So I've made a lot of money in my life, and then like currently I'm making about $47,000 a year, which is about half of what I used to make. So like, obviously I've had to adjust what my lifestyle looks like. Thankfully, for the most part, my lifestyle is very much that of what I've been living the last like 10 years or so. I didn't, obviously I don't have like, weird flags on my walls and stuff like I did in college, and I have a headboard, but like, I'm still living a pretty normal existence, I would say. And it's kind of funny. I totally aside to anything we've talked about, I do a daily vlog that I've been doing. I think yesterday's was 616 in a row, and I post every day showcasing my day to day life. And I think one of the attractions of that and the reasons it's resonated with people is because I'm a normal dude. I live a normal life. I don't do anything crazy. I have some fun when I get to like fly and take cool pictures of race cars, but that's not a main thing that I do. And so the day to day is the monotony of me getting to sit at my desk at all day doing my day job. And it's caused me to have to look at my life and really focus in on the parts that I can derive a lot of joy from, the little things in my day. Because when you're
Yes.
trying to draft like a narrative structure of your day every day, you really have to learn to focus on small things. And so, like, I think back to some of the days where I was like, the main thing I'm highlighting today is a new breakfast sandwich that I made for myself. Like, that's my highlight of my day. But I think that sense of normalcy, and showcasing a normal life online can be very powerful for a lot of people. And I think it's why it's resonated with folks because, there's this idea of like, people who showcase their wealth is kind of like one of the biggest content categories. People who just, they're like, here's the 16 Labubus that I bought, and they're showcasing this immense wealth. And I'm like, yeah, I bought groceries today. Thanks for coming with me.
Right.
Like,
Well, I
it's just
think
a very different experience with that.
they're displaying their wealth, but they're also displaying the decisions that they've made with their wealth,
Yeah.
right? They're displaying how they consume, how they, like, operate as consumers.
Yeah.
I wrote this in the chat, but this idea of consistency, I believe, is a form of self-love. And,
Mhm.
continuing to show up both for yourself and for others then becomes an act of leadership. And, doing mundane, normal human things out loud is a very important form of leadership that we especially need, I believe, from men right now.
Yeah. And to your point, I think, I'm not maybe like the best example of this, but I feel like I'm able to showcase, you don't, I feel like the prevailing idea online is like if you're not a millionaire by the time you're 21, like you're a scrub. You haven't made it. Like you're done. You're cooked. And that's obviously not the case. And I think that no matter where you're at in life, being able to understand that it's not about being able to showcase wealth, it's about are you able to have the lifestyle that you wish to have? Maybe that is a very extravagant lifestyle. That's great. But maybe it's just, hey, I want to be able to show up. I want to be able to afford to like have a dog and take care of them. And I want to show up for my friends and I want to be able to like go out once a week. And maybe that's what it is. And that's totally fine and valid as well. And so it's just about understanding of like, hey, you don't need to compare yourself to other people on the internet because most people are probably potentially living beyond their means, and just do what makes you happy. And that's such a hard thing to do though, of like, I want to do what makes me happy and I don't want anybody else to tell me that I can't do that. But the problem is everybody wants to tell you what you have to do. And
Right.
so being able to tune that out is honestly a skill set that is hard to develop because that comparison is such a thief of joy. And I am so guilty of it too.
We all are. We all are. Yeah, this idea of, like, we all wanna be happy, this idea of, like, live and let live. I grew up in New Hampshire. Our
Hmm.
state motto is, "Live free or die," right? Um, this idea too, though, when we talk about, men in leadership today
Mhm.
and these feelings about money and other things, like when you think about the way culture, society, especially here in America, is evolving, devolving in 2025, both and evolving in some ways, devolving in other ways. It's all part of the
Mhm.
natural process. How do you believe that these things intersect? Like, as I said, I think you bring a really unique perspective to, both having sisters above you, being from a family of service and educators. It's clearly in your blood to want to be of service and to know that the better you are, the better you can be of service.
Yeah,
So, if no one said that out loud to you, I'm here to do it. And thank you. All of us are
appreciate
really
that.
grateful for your leadership.
Sorry if you hear my
Um,
cat yelling at me.
Oh, it's okay. I think your cat's just, like, saying, "Me too. Yeah, I agree. Dax is great." Um, uh,
This is Lucy.
Hi, Lucy. Hi, Lucy.
She just wants to be in her bed.
But, like, what's going on with the men? What do you think's going on with the men?
Yeah, okay. No, you can't come up here. There is a TikTok, channel that I really like, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's this woman who goes around, she goes up to men, she's like, "Hey, what's up with men these days?" And it's very interesting to see the conversations that she has because some people are, pretty self-aware and they go, men, hold themselves to these insane standards, but a lot of men that I see in those conversations end up taking it very personally, and I think it can be very hard sometimes for people to separate a critique of a larger, broader system as not a critique of them individually. And it's tough sometimes when you're like, well, if people are like, "Oh, men suck," and I'm always like, "Yeah, they do. I can recognize that absolutely." But then there's people who are like, "Oh, wow, I don't suck." And it's like, well, dude, I'm not criticizing you directly. I'm saying men as a whole, like the individual and the collective are two different things. And I think it's hard sometimes to separate those out. And so for a lot of men, I feel like we so much of masculinity as it's portrayed in media, I believe is purely performative. Um, whether it's this hyper masculinity of you need to have a six pack, you need to be in insane shape. The average person isn't. It's These are absolutely outliers. Is it good to exercise and be healthy? Absolutely, but when you have such a small subset of people who are saying that you need to be one specific way and they're painting with a very broad brush that doesn't allow for any, like your necklace says, any semblance of nuance, that is what causes people to have these image issues, to play this comparison game and say, I'm not enough because I don't have XYZ. I'm not enough because the internet tells me I need to have a six pack. I need to drive a Lamborghini. I need to, pay my own way for literally everything. And it's like, no, we can rely on our friendships, our interpersonal relationships. We can rely on our support systems, and we don't have to do everything alone. And I think the United States culture as a whole is so set on individualism, this rugged individualism that we have. And it's like, no, collectivism can be so incredibly important. And I'm connecting a lot of tangents here because my brain's going 5,000 miles a minute here.
We
There was
love
a study. There was
it.
a study I remember seeing that talked about blue zones. Which blue zones, if you don't know, are where people in the world live to consistently older ages, into the
Right, like
hundreds,
the
late
interest.
90s, exactly. And one of the biggest tenets that they see and consistent things they see across different cultures, across different ethnicities, is this idea of community, and having community around you leads to a longer life, and that is something that our society in America just simply is not built for. We there's a lot of talk online about the death of third spaces, and that absolutely is a real thing that contributes to this lack of community. And so I think for men as a whole, there are no real efforts and structures to build community. I commend women so heavily for all the community building that they do. And I'm very jealous of that because there's so many women's walking groups or book clubs or art groups. Like it's so cool to see them building these connections, these interpersonal friendships. And it's really, really cool and inspiring to see, and it's why I love something like what our mutual friend Jonathan is doing with this men's walking group in LA, and he's trying to convince me to start one here, and I'm trying to figure out if I can find time to try to do something like that here.
Right.
But it
I'll find you some
takes
Dax.
it takes such a specific level of investment into those types of things to build those communities. And I feel like at the end of the day, everybody is searching for community. And unfortunately, for a lot of men, you know, when they find those communities, instead of looking at how they can take action to help build and better communities for men across the board, it's looking for someone to blame for their lack of community. And so it's this idea of they're looking outward when they really truly need to be looking inwards, and doing this hard work that it takes to build these communities, because it's such an intentional act. And like, as someone who lives in a city that I didn't grow up in, I'm a transplant here. Making friends here is incredibly difficult. Dating is incredibly difficult in a modern age. Work from home. I live by myself. I don't talk to a lot of people in my day to day that's not through a computer. Um, and so it is really difficult sometimes. You have to be so intentional with the way you use your time, with the way you put yourself out there. And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. You have to do the cringe 14-year-old thing of like, hey, I've had a great conversation. Do you want to be friends with me? Like, you have to say the cringe thing sometimes to try and forge those connections. But it takes
I
so
love
much
that you said that
intentional
you have
effort.
to say the cringe thing.
You
I
do. You
love that you said
absolutely
you have to
have
say
to.
the yeah. Well, it's funny too because like so many dad jokes like are cringe, but why are we comfortable with certain cringe things
Right?
but not like, and that's it all comes back to humor, right?
I
Which I
wanna
think is
say
such
it
a cool.
was Taylor Swift who said this. I think it was, like, at a commencement speech that she gave at one point, but she was talking about how you just need to embrace the cringe. Like, if you look back at your life, you're gonna cringe at yourself no matter what you do. So embrace the cringe, embrace where you're at, do what you think is the right thing to do and what makes you happy. Who cares what the judgment is outside of that? Now, that's also obviously, like, a very hard thing to do of, like, let me set aside the external judgment factor, like, that is so hard to do. But yeah, embrace the cringe. Like, who cares if you
Yeah,
embarrass yourself? Like, you're more of your own critic than anybody else is.
totally. I mean, my son tells me I'm cringe. I wear it as a badge of honor. I'm fine with it.
I mean, the moment you
I
hit 28-year old, like, there's some younger people in my audience who will call me Unc, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm 31." Like,
Well, it's all relative, right? And even, I think that I'm someone who has collected a lot of interesting people throughout my life. Are they all
Mhm.
my like friends? Are they all my good friends or my best friends, right? And
Yeah.
that's something where words matter. That I often, I have lots of things I say when I'm like intrigued. I'll say like, "Oh, I look forward to getting to know you better. I feel like we can do
Yeah.
interesting things together."
I've
Right?
been I've been trying to use, like, I used to always be like, "Oh, yeah, my friend, my friend." I always used friend as just, like, a broad term, and I'm trying to, like, get better at, utilizing, like, colleague, acquaintance, using these more, specific terminology, and it's been, like, hard to, like, remind myself, like, "Hey, I'm gonna try to use these specific terms to try to define these relationships in a more appropriate manner." And I think that's
Totally.
that's, like, a personal boundary I've had to try to set, because, like, not everybody is going to be your friend, and I think that is a thing of like, I've had to learn to do that, and like, to get like, parasocial for a moment, trying to do that with an audience that I've building, like, how much of myself do I give to my audience? I live a very public life with doing a daily vlog and live streaming 20ish hours a week. How do I maintain time for myself that's just me? How do I maintain a private existence out of that? Because that is still important to maintain and to have. And so it's like, being able to choose what I share and how much I engage with my audience. I need to remind myself, like, not everybody I meet through the internet is going to be a friend. I've had a lot of amazing experiences meeting friends through the internet and getting to meet them in real life and having them become real life friends. But it is a weird, like, boundary that I'm still learning to set that and understand where is that line for me, and where can I, maintain this viewer presenter kind of relationship where it's necessary and appropriate, versus like, I have some audience members who have become friends. And so it's kind of like it's a weird relationship, and how I need to
Yeah.
redefine those for myself.
Have you seen the movie Friendship from A24 Films?
I have, yeah.
What do you think of it?
Um it's been a little while since I watched it. Um but
I can
yeah,
share what
I
I think of it.
please. I've got, yeah.
I mean, I loved it, I enjoyed it, I think it's a great piece of
Mhm.
cultural, important piece of culture this year. It's totally kooky, it's definitely not everyone's humor or type of
Yeah.
entertainment, right? My favorite part about the movie is, going back to this, like, sharing of the mundane, like, I made a sandwich today, it's not like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I shaved my truffle out of my Lamborghini onto my sandwich," right? It's like, "I made a sandwich today." Um, one of the more, like, basic background kind of normalized things in the film is that men are friends and they hang out and they get in circles and do cool stuff together that's not focused on necessarily
Mhm.
drinking or objectifying women, and, or, playing games, singing songs, I think this idea that, like, the most normal thing of like, the weird part about the movie was not all these male friendships. The male friendship was normalized, and
Mhm.
the men being in community together was normalized and caring for each other. The kooky part was the overlay, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, when you have what's
Reductive to say that, but
I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who was, because he's in that movie. He was the one from, I Think You Should Leave. Tim Robinson, is that his name?
um, it's I
I
Jay can
can't
put it in
remember.
the chat.
Tim,
I'm
okay,
blanking on
yes,
his
yeah.
name.
I couldn't
Okay.
for the life of me remember his name. But yeah, having him be there, because yeah, you're right, it's not everybody's sense of humor. But I think having movies like that that showcase kind of that mundanity in a way is really important, because I feel like through a lot of modern media, what we see of male friendships is around, like, whether it's an action film or something, it's around this like hyper masculine kind of type of goal. And it's like, no, you can be a suburban dad. I think back to what was oh my gosh, there was a movie and it was oh, okay, I'm blanking super hard here. It was about a bunch of dads, not RV. Um, oh my gosh, what is the one I'm thinking of?
How long ago?
2012 maybe. Oh my goodness, why can't I think of this? My brain is
I
absolutely
mean,
failing me here.
men in groups as humor is great. I mean, remember Anchorman?
Oh
Like,
yeah, oh yeah, that
you
was phenomenal.
know and, yeah, my son and I have been actually watching a lot of Friends, like reruns of the sitcom Friends, which has been very sweet. Uh, what's the film you're thinking of? Now I wanna know.
I'm trying to remember. I'm like rapidly Googling, trying to figure it out at the same time.
Thinking Friends for the End of the World?
It wasn't that, but that was also another great one. It was one where there's like a bunch of dads and they're all like hanging out together, and I want to say it was like Seth Green might have been in it. Oh my gosh, I want to say
Wait,
this came out like a
Seth
sequel.
Green,
I'm totally blanking super hard here.
Hot Tub Time Machine?
No, also a good one. I don't remember what it is. I'm trying to think of, but no, yeah, having those showcases, because I think I'm not married, but I think for a lot of men, the friends that they have later in life are just their wives, friends, husbands, and I feel like when it goes back to this level of intentionality. There's so much intentionality that's needed to build these friendships. And I think especially in like the context of like an interpersonal relationship, it's good to have different sets of friends, because you're able to go and have these unique independent experiences and then come back and like share those in the context of your own relationship. And so it takes that level of intentionality again to seek these people out and to, find these friendships. And I think that's what Jonathan is doing is so powerful, of like, trying to build community for men outside of politics, outside of anything that's other than just like, hey, we're here, we're in connection with each other. And I think this is going to go on a very weird tangent, with how prevalent AI is becoming and how much it's taking over entertainment and creativity and connection. I think it might be grown-ups. I think grown-ups might be what I'm thinking of. DB, you might be onto that one. I can't quite remember, but anyways, there's been such a push for people to have in-person experiences, whether it's the abandonment of dating apps and people trying to date in person. Friend of mine here in the Twin Cities runs date in-person dating events with a group called Thursday, and they've been some of the best events that I've ever gone to, and I've met great people through
Mm.
those. And that's such a more positive experience than trying to use a dating app is. I think people trying to find and meet friends, that all happens interpersonally in person. And I think especially after the pandemic and people being having their entire life be online, we have such a passion for in-person connection, whether it's concerts, going to the movies again. I feel like the entire Barbenheimer, fever dream is a great like microcosm of people want in-person connection. They want in-person interaction. And I think that is going to continue to be such a huge focus for a lot of people. And so we have to build those frameworks for community building that can happen in healthy ways.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen this a lot among like Gen Z and younger people. There's like almost a return to these like almost like classical fraternal organizations. Think like the Knights of Columbus or the oh gosh, trying to think back to these small, you know what I'm talking about. Those smaller, kind of like more like boomer level fraternal organizations. There is a
Even
level of that happening because people want this connection. They want this community, and people are desperate for community and just don't know where to go to find that.
and this idea too of identity or affinity groups, right? Like connecting over a thing that you like to do. And also intergenerational, like you have boomers, like you said, getting on Facebook and other things. Like my mom has a like Beatle fans for democracy Facebook group, right? That like, you know, yeah, this is absolutely happening. And at the same time, our very primal human nature of connecting, interconnecting, building
Mhm.
community has been like interrupted and suppressed by so much of, as we've been discussing, media and other things. We have a comment here from the community around men's friends and wives' friends. Um, this idea of being in a relationship and you become, kind of becomes part of your identity, and like how important it is to have, if you're a couple, to have couple friends,
Mhm.
but also like not all couples are going to want to hang out with all parts of the couple. And there's, if someone wants to like Google this, the man keeping was a meme that was going around the internet a couple months ago
Mhm.
about women kind of keeping the social calendar of their husbands, like making all the plans and all of these
Yeah.
other things. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to go on a tangent of that, because you have lived parts of your adult life in relationship, part of
Yeah.
it not in partnership, um, and your ability to have friends outside of your intimate partner is
Yeah. It's very
complicated,
important.
especially gender, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, people are like, oh, can you be friends, right?
I so it's so funny. I When I moved here to Minnesota, I had no friends here. The friends I had were my ex's friends. But she grew up here. She was born and raised here and had moved away and was coming back. And so for me, it was like, I am meeting all these people. The only friends I have are, in person at least, are her friends. So it was a very odd experience for me trying to, like, you know, adjust to a new place, meet new people, try to build these new friendships. While I also still had all these other friends that now lived 2,000 miles away from me that I'm trying to
Right.
maintain a connection with as well. And so, like, my best friend Jacob and his wife Lauren and their daughter Luna, who's my goddaughter, we meet every other week. We have a video call to just like check in, see how life is going, and just like that's how we maintain this level of connection. And that's been honestly so great. I mentioned this earlier, but like some of my childhood friends that I've been able to reconnect with, we will, we chat nearly daily because we play video games together. So we're in like a voice call, and like, sure, we're talking about like, oh, go, get that guy over there, but also like, hey man, how's your daughter? How's life? How's your job? How's things going? It's like we're discussing these things through this like medium of getting to play video games together. But I think again, it goes back to the idea of intentionality. You have to set up, like Jay's saying, I have a weekly call with my sisters on Tuesdays. You have to set this level of intentionality and plan it out to be able to do these things. Um, I've kind of forgotten the question, honestly. I went on a tangent.
No, it's a wonderful tangent. We're talking about male friendship, and that I
Yes.
think
Okay.
has been, yeah. Like I said, I think one of the things that we've realized we have in common is being community builders,
Yeah.
connectors, and seeing, the marketing and culture angle in that. And so, yeah, I mean, all of this, the through line too is like a richness of life. Going back to his money, what is that? What gives you that richness of life? What gives you that feeling of enoughness, the sufficiency that we've been talking about when you are in your
Yeah.
power, your purpose? And, you obviously, friendships and relationships are currency for you like they are for me. So I
They
understand.
very much are, yeah. And I put a lot of effort into the friends. Oh, that's where I was going with this. um, my so once I went through that breakup and we went our separate ways, I found myself in a very foreign to me place, an intimidating place with no friends. How do I even start to make friends in person? And there's a card game called We're Not Really Strangers. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It sounds like it'd be right up your alley if you haven't. I'm a huge fan of it. And basically, the idea of the game is you have these little cards, and they are just prompts that help to create conversation, whether you are complete strangers with somebody, you've been in a relationship with them, you're dating, whatever. And I would this is when I was trying to force myself to go out there, and I've always been an extrovert, so like I'm not intimidated by this socially. I literally would go to this coffee shop that was down the road from me, and I was getting into reading, so I'd sit there and I'd be reading my book, and I'd be working, and just like have coffee and stuff, and I would set a little note card up that said care to play, and I just had the game sitting there, and I had a couple random people sit down and just have a conversation with me, and that was I didn't end up becoming friends with them, but I did have these conversations with these people, and I got to learn. There was a woman who sat down and she told me about growing up in Sudan, and then she made her way to Portland. I'm like, hold up, you were in Portland? Yeah, I'm from Oregon. Oh my gosh! And so then we realized that we had this like connection. We knew some of the same people somehow, and we came from just wildly different backgrounds, and it showcases to me how much there is connection. Like for a very big world, there are random things that just connect you, and it's so cool to see that. But again, it goes back to this idea of intentionality. The couple friends that I made through being super intentional. I started going to these in-person like singles events, and so much of that was around just like I need to be around people. I need to talk to people, and that's like my barrier right now. Coming out of this depression that I was in after my breakup and everything. I need to put myself out there to not only just like engage with other people, but to like try to build a social life. I don't even know where to start doing that. So I'm just going to go to these events and just like if I talk to somebody, that's my baseline. If I talk to somebody, that's a win for me. And I did, and there I found myself at a singles like happy hour one night, and I had talked to some different people. We did exchanged Instagrams like, "Hey, do you want to be friends?" Sure. Had done all the cringe stuff, and I'm sitting there, and these two women come over and they sit down. Like, I'm like, "Oh, are you guys here with the singles?" And they're like, "Well, kind of." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what's kind of mean?" They're like, "Well, we're here, but we're not really here." And so we just started having this conversation, and little did we know that we absolutely just hit it off. Like, and so those are my two friends that I've made here, Lexi and Leah, and basically, it was like, they're like, we like you. You're going to be our friend now. They just adopted me. And we literally went from that singles happy hour to like this barcade. We went out, we had a great time that night. And I remember talking to my therapist like a couple days later of like, okay, how do I have a repeat interaction to make friends? Like, I need to like break down this
How do we
process of
scale
building
this
friends.
project?
Exactly. And it was such a weird thing, but I was overthinking the text that I sent of like, "Hey guys, I had a great time. Like, do you guys want to hang out again?" Like, I was completely overthinking
Right.
it. But they've been some of the most supportive friends that I could have ever dreamed of having. And like they show up for me in so many different ways. And those friendships have been so amazing for me. And that kind of goes to kind of what you had touched on briefly of like, can men and women be friends outside of the idea of like dating relationships? Absolutely, they can. Absolutely, they can. And that's been so rewarding for me to have those friendships, and just to have people who I have met completely organically who know, like, I say this new version of me. I've just been through so much personal development in the last several years. I feel like old me is a different person entirely, and so getting to
Mhm.
this new me that I like and I appreciate, and getting to engage with other people from that standpoint of like already liking myself and getting to approach the world in that way has been amazing. Making friends as a guy is also still incredibly difficult. I know there's a lot of women out there who are like, "How do I meet men?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm trying to meet men just to be friends with, and I can't find them." And so it's the hardest thing in the world to find men to be friends with. And
Right.
that's doubly hard in the Midwest because so many people here like never branch outside of their like high school friendships. And both of my brother-in-laws that are from Minnesota speak to that. They're like, "Oh yeah, I still hang out with all my high school buddies." I'm like, "Guys, this is the problem." Like,
Well, and even though we came of age during marriage equality and, lots of GSAs at schools and other things, homophobia is still in the water and in the air and has been and is obviously being
mhm,
accentuated by the attacks on LGBTQ rights right now. But this idea of like be straight, be normal,
yeah,
um, is such a thing. And when I talk to men about how patriarchy and misogyny hurt them and like, what's
mhm,
in it for men to lead on human rights and brave new leadership right
yeah,
now. If there's ever been something that you have wanted to do, that your soul wanted to do, that you did not do because you were afraid it would look or seem gay, or someone might think you were gay,
mhm,
that's how patriarchy and misogyny and homophobia hurt you because you're not
yeah,
being your authentic self and you're disconnected from your truth and you're human. And I think that's when we go back to how do we market all of this better to men?
Yeah.
I'd love to take on that, everything from therapy to introspection and this intentionality that you speak so beautifully of.
Yeah. I think it starts with normalization, showcasing it in a way of like, hey, this is just like on my daily vlog, people know like it's become a thing, and I've crafted it in such a way that it's a narrative point every Tuesday of like it's Tuesday, so you guys, my audience, you know that that means it's therapy night for me, and I specifically include it and talk about it every single time. And it's funny if I rewind a little bit, the reason I started getting more into content creation and posting on TikTok specifically was because of our mutual friend Jonathan. He does this journaling series called Asking the Question. And for me, I was still kind of coming out of my depression at that point, and like doing those videos helped with my own self reflection, speaking, learning to speak better into a camera, just getting in the habit of creating, and like that led to so many vulnerable conversations with people, and just showcasing like, hey, you can talk about your feelings on the internet and you won't be criticized for it. And I think just the more you show that it can be done, the more people are like, oh, I can do this too. And so that's what I try to do these days. Is like I try to just, I'm comfortable with who I am. I know who I am, and I don't care what people think of me. It's funny. I had a couple weeks ago. I was playing Fortnite, and I was just live streaming this live event that they had. And somebody, I had like 150 people on my TikTok chat, and somebody was like, "Oh wow, you paint your nails?" I'm like, "Yeah, what of it?" Like, I love painting my nails. They're very fun. They're chipped to all hell right now, but I love painting my fingernails. The main reason I started is because like I have anxiety and I like picking at my fingernails as like a like self soothing, but it destroys my hands. And that's the one thing I found is if I paint my fingernails, I can pick up the nail polish and not my hands. But also, I just like how it looks. I like painting my fingernails. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a cool way of doing self expression. And so the more that I just showcase of like, hey, you can paint your fingernails, you can do whatever you want. My hobbies outside of content creation and streaming include going to coffee shops, farmers markets, reading, a lot of things that are maybe stereotypically seen as more feminine interests. But I also have like I'm into motorsports and race cars. Like there's so many different things. And it's like if you do it and you identify as masculine, great. That's now a masculine activity. If you do it and you identify as
Exactly.
feminine, great. That's now a feminine activity. Whatever it
Right.
is, if you do it, it's defined however you would define yourself. And how external factors define
Beautiful.
that doesn't matter. And that is,
Yeah.
again, so much easier said than done. And I feel like the one thing I can do with these, albeit small, but little mighty platform that I have is I can just showcase that, normalize it. And I think the more that we normalize therapy, the more we normalize being vulnerable with people, that can lead to other people saying, you know what, if that person can do it, maybe I can as well. And I don't know how much of an influence I've been able to have through people on that, but I know that like there are people who I get a comment or a DM probably once a week from someone who says, "Hey, your vlog, I look forward to seeing this every day. This has really like added value to my life," and that is makes me tear up and cry because I'm like I'm just showcasing the to me what seems like a boring life that I live, but to other people that is something that they find a lot of joy and value out of. And I'm like, okay, well this is motivation
I
to keep going with
encourage
it.
you I encourage you to screenshot those and put them in a hype file somewhere for
I
yourself.
have some because 'cause I'm too good at telling myself I'm not enough, and so I have a lot of those where, like, anytime anybody's giving me, like, an overwhelming compliment, I'm like, "And we're gonna screenshot that, we're gonna put that in my little notes folder there, so when I feel like I'm not enough, I can go back and reference that and have this body of evidence that tells me I'm wrong." Um
And when you are asked to name your price, to remind you to add some zeros and add tax.
Exactly, and that is so terrifying, and I still struggle with valuing my creative work, and I still struggle with, like, placing a value and asking for too much because like, I also, like it's a weird thing of, like, I don't wanna limit myself on the opportunity that I get, but I also don't want an opportunity where I'm not gonna be valued in the right way. And it's
Totally.
it's such a hard balance to strike when you really wanna have this valuable experience that you're like, "I think I would get a lot of value out of this experience personally," and to me, that's valuable as well, but also, I need to make sure I'm still getting paid for this because I am providing a lot of value that is a tangible value as well as the intangible value that's coming back to me, but it's a very weird balance to try to strike there.
Here, here. I've been, an entrepreneur for almost 20 years. And I've gone through phases where I'd say, I've never regretted not getting a client that couldn't afford me,
Yeah.
right? Because I wanted to work on that thing because it would have been cool, right?
Mhm.
And in hindsight, I was able like, I don't regret like, I would have been running myself ragged, I probably wouldn't have been
Yep.
appreciated. At the same time, as it can be really intimidating to add all those zeros to the ask,
Absolutely.
and adding those zeros to the ask make me feel better about doing other stuff for free because I
Yeah.
want it to be given with abundance, like community
Mhm.
building to uplift the well-being of men and boys. I think that there are so many ways for us to do us in the world, and the more
Absolutely.
conversations that we have like this, where it's like you can't be what you can't see, is something I heard all the time in like women and
Exactly,
girls
exactly.
circles. Same thing
I
with
mean,
men and boys.
and that goes back to the idea of like representation is so critically important. And it's not just about like so much of it, it can be seeing a person who looks like you in a position that you maybe aspire to. That is incredibly important. But also just seeing people do things that you have deemed impossible for yourself. Go back to the start of the conversation where it comes to feats of great athleticism. It is
Mhm.
possible. Like you if you wanted to dunk a basketball, let's say, you could probably learn to do that. You gotta put in the effort. You gotta go through like a jump training program. You need to hit the gym. You need to work out, but you can do it. It is possible. And I feel like we see that with like people running marathons. My parents are both like absolute freaks of nature when it comes to their athleticism. My dad's in his 70s and my mom's in their 60s, and they just ran the Twin Cities Marathon. And I'm like, okay, y'all need to like slow down. Like it's ridiculous.
Good for
But the amount of
them.
people I saw, because I was here, I was supporting them, I was zooming around on my electric scooter, taking photos and stuff. The amount of people who I saw who you would look at and deem, oh, that person's not that athletic, and they're running a whole entire freaking marathon. It is more than possible, and the range of people who are capable of doing these things is so vast. It's not like we like to think it's only one way, and this goes back to like what your necklace says, nuance. There's so much nuance in the world, and there's such a range of things and places that can achieve greatness, and it's just about being able to try to see that in yourself as well. um was my dad vulnerable, and how did I get there? It's interesting. I don't think my parents will watch this, so that's probably good. But I through this big last couple of years, I recognized a lot of um, behavioral patterns that my parents have modeled in their own behavior in their own lives that I had picked up and that I didn't necessarily want to continue modeling. This idea of breaking free of this little bit of a cycle of generational trauma in a way. um, my mom has always been a person who necessarily doesn't talk about things. She likes to bottle things up. But that's exactly how her mother was. It's how my grandma was. And so, like, if I rewind to when like my grandmother's and my grandfather's healths were declining, they didn't know that it was as bad as it was until towards the end because no one shared that information within the family. So even though my mom has like 9 brothers and sisters, nobody in the family really knew how bad it was until until it was unable to be hidden. And it kind of goes back to this idea of like this obfuscation of mental health can be such a detriment to everybody involved. Um, and my dad, I don't know if I've really ever there's been glimpses of my dad being very vulnerable with things, but I feel like it's very passive. I have to kind of dig it out of him sometimes. And it kind of goes back to this idea of like if I can show up and I can showcase it and I can set the level of like, hey, I'm going to be vulnerable first. It gives people the space in the room to be reciprocal in that and be vulnerable in return. And so I feel like I've done that some with my parents a little bit of like, hey, I recognize that these are potentially not the healthiest behaviors. I don't want to continue modeling some them, so I'm going to make the active choice to change my behavior. But I feel like this is something that maybe I can model to them to give them space to try to do that as well. My cat is
Yeah.
meowing at me from somewhere again too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time we were talking about this, the cat was meowing too, so I think we're onto something good.
She
Because
loves yelling at me.
back to, like, who taught you this, right? Like, did you read and research about generational trauma? Did you feel it in your body somatically? Like, how did you know that there was a there and that it was within your locus of control to change it?
Yeah. So through my breakup that I went through was really a foundational, like it was an inflection point in my life. And so much of it was like I was at such a broken point emotionally, intellectually, whatever, that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to like myself. I didn't know how to restart my life because I felt like my entire life had fallen apart. So how do I rebuild that? Where do I even start? And one of the places I started was just trying to learn about myself. And I started researching about attachment styles, is kind of where I started. And so
Mm,
I started learning about like, oh, okay, I am anxiously attached. Okay, great. How can I work to be more securely attached from that starting point? And just through the education that I like slowly pieced together through YouTube, reading different books on the topic, I just started, trying to deep dive into this and learn about myself really. And once I started understanding and having the words to talk about it, and then also know like these are the words I need to have to talk about it. These are the patterns I need to recognize. I can then start recognizing those in things that are happening around me. And as I started to recognize those, I recognized, oh, these are maybe like avoidant attachment behaviors in my parents. These are anxious attachment behaviors in my parents. Oh, okay, maybe that's where I got this from. We as children, we model we embody what is modeled for us. So if what is modeled
100%.
for us is not necessarily the healthiest behavior, we're going to embody that unconsciously, not realizing that's what we're doing. And that's where that idea of like generational trauma comes from. Because again, my grandmother and my grandfather, they showcase this idea of hiding these interpersonal issues. My parents kind of did the same. It's not something that I want to continue doing. And it's something that I'm like, I'm going to set my foot down for myself. It's not about changing other people's behavior. It's about changing my behavior because I want to change my behavior for myself. And so the more that I can show up more authentically and more in line with how I want to be, that just showcases it for other people. And so yeah, it's kind of just been self-taught, but yeah, it's just kind of the route I went down. And I was like, just redefining who I wanted to be and what does that idyllic version of myself look like? What does that person do? How do they show up for other people? And then I just try every day to try to embody that.
right. Beautiful. What do you think stops other men, again, not a monolith, want to
Yeah.
generalize. What do you believe stops other men from realizing what they have the power to control in their own lives to improve their state?
I think it's a level of awareness and like, people like to talk about like self-awareness and like self-reflection. And I feel like for the longest time, like I knew I had specific feelings of like, I know something feels off, but I don't have the words to describe it. I don't have the words to define this. I don't have the depth of emotional understanding to truly pick apart what this is. And so for me, it was easy at that time to go, oh, well, I don't know what it is. So I'm not going to worry about it. So I just didn't. And it's so easy when a lot of men's spaces, self help means getting physically fit, making more money. Those are the two pillars of being better, getting better, working on yourself. Get your money up, get your funny up, whatever it is. But it's not understand your own emotional internal state. Break that down. Figure out your emotions. Understand your childhood trauma. Like none of it is related to that. And so I think because I have had, great women in my life who have been able to showcase these things, I was able to go, oh, hey, that's more what I need to be working on. And I think it's tough, and I don't know where the starting point is for men. I think the more that we can try and just understand what our position is in the world and recognize of like, hey, recognizing your privilege is a great start. You have privilege as a man, no matter where you're at. If you are a straight white man in this country, you have a lot of privilege, and I recognize that. And I guess I think back to I had a college professor who it was in one of my interpersonal communication classes, and she had us do a privilege walk, and it was literally like we all went outside and she was like, this is a list of things that are completely out of your control as an individual. Step forward, step backwards, depending on how privileged you may be. I was, of course, one of the most privileged people in that classroom, but it's like that makes a lot of sense when I look at the factors that go into that. I was one of only a few men in that class. I was one of only a few white men in that class. So it makes a lot of sense that I would be where I was in that privilege. So it's like, okay, now that I understand this and recognize it, what do I do with that information? And I guess for me, I'm trying to think back of where this came from, but I've always been the person who's like, I want to try and use the positions of power that I've seen because I've seen so many people who are in positions of power use that to put other people down, use that to benefit themselves and not a collective greater good. And so that's something I've always wanted to do is like I want to use whatever privilege and power I have to help people in when it's in leadership roles that I've held professionally, when I've been trying to like build marketing teams and set, agendas for meetings and stuff, I always do it in a way where it's like, I want to make sure that the people who I'm in charge of have what they need to be successful. And if they don't, that's a reflection on me as their leader. It is my job as their leader to set them up for the most success. It's not about
Right.
me getting successful and me saying these things. It's about them having what they need to be successful. And it's like I do this
Yeah.
weird thing where I say we all the time when I mean I, and I'm very bad about ever actually saying I. I say we all the time. Um,
Interesting.
and I'm trying to get better at that, but like I also do see it as a we. It is a collective effort, because I truly don't believe that anybody does anything alone. And so whether
Right.
it's me saying we in that it's the people supporting me and me, that's the we. I have a hard time saying I because it almost feels arrogant in a way to say that I did this myself. Even though sometimes I should probably say I.
That's the balance. That's the nuance. Yeah, it's easy to the a server at a restaurant will be like, "Oh, are we enjoying our food?"
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's so funny because it's like it goes back to the idea of like whenever you like enjoy your movie, thanks you too. Oh wait, they're not seeing a movie. Oh no, I
right.
do that
Wind your
constantly.
blade. Right.
Enjoy your
Exactly.
coffee, you too. Oh god.
Well, I will say for someone who, is not a biological parent and,
Mhm.
sounds like not in a specific partnership right now that you spoke about, you are a very natural and organic caregiver, caretaker.
Yeah,
And that is what we need to elevate voices like yours. We need to elevate your voice and your platform. We need to elevate, um, help you find the others and elevate the others.
yeah, definitely.
There's more like us, like you, like we out there. Uh, this is yeah, we have someone in the community here
Hmm.
talking about an inflection point of first marriage ending. Felt horrible. Instead of diving into depression, I asked myself how I can be a better dad. And since that moment, right, it's about what we focus on, what we choose to pay
Hmm.
attention to, where we choose to intentionally allocate our resources. And I
Yeah,
can speak, I know that balance personally. Um,
it goes back to that
we're
idea of intentionality, and I think that like back to kind of your question of like how do men realize these steps they need to take. I think because of the privilege a lot of men hold, it's easy for us to act without intentionality because we can just skate through things. We can choose to not engage with politics because we have the privilege of them not directly impacting us. They do directly impact the people that are in our lives and that we care about, but we individually may not be impacted by that. And so for us it's easy, we can just skate by, we don't have to worry about it, it's not a thing. But it takes a level of intentionality to recognize like, hey, maybe I'm not impacted by it, but people I care about are impacted by it, so maybe I should step up and I should take action there. And I think it's so easy for so many men to be able to just coast through things without having to be intentional, that being intentional feels burdensome, and that can be very intimidating for a lot of people. But I
I
think
really I've seen also a lot of fear around doing the wrong thing, right? So you can have decision paralysis and you can have all this, I
absolutely.
want to be intentional, but I don't even know what to do or how to do it. And I'm so
Yeah,
terrified of doing the wrong thing. And that goes back to cringe and shame. And, it really is an era. People say it's like
yeah.
impossible to be a man right now. I think it's impossible to be a human right now. I don't think we're meant to explore this much, intensity as living, breathing things.
Yeah, one of the
But
things
I
I've
feel like
learned through content
forever
creation.
we'll have to have you back on here, and I know.
I'll be happy
Um,
to.
can we be friends, Dax? Because I think we
Yes, we
have a
can
lot of
totally
it
be friends.
together.
We can totally be friends.
Okay, so I think Jay's looking for a raid for us, unless you have a raid suggestion.
Most people I rate are not even close to being on at this point in time. Um, Trying to think. I don't know if I have. Let me do this. Let me pull up my broadcasting
All of
back
this
in
is an
here.
experiment for us, so we're excited to get your recommendations, and
Stream manager.
thanks for the land of and into your world and coming into
Oh
to
yeah, of
ours.
course. No,
It's
and
great
I mean it's
for bringing
I
us
didn't
together.
know how much of my community would actually show up, so it's cool to see people joining in here. Let's see. Let's see. Raid channel. Who is even on
I
here?
hope that you'll be at the next gathering of Bowie's Club, which is our club of guys who are guys and some women too who are focused on uplifting the well-being of boys and men and doing
Ooh,
that
okay.
across every sector, every industry.
I will have to look for that. I don't know if I have any good suggestion for someone to raid, but so proud of this community built Dak and the wonderful humans in it. Thanks for the conversation. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody. This has been really lovely. And this, when I think about the vision of what this topic should bring up, this is pretty rad. So
I
thank
was so
you.
nervous for this conversation, but you made it such a great experience. So thank you so much for having me on.
Oh my goodness. Seriously, my pleasure. To be continued on many fronts, and I apologize for my graininess and technical bandwidth things being here in the Hudson Valley, upstate New York. All right.
Awesome.
We'll talk soon. To be continued. Thanks, Land of Ann community and producers and everybody. This has been the His Money Stream. Bye.